understood as ontologically independent. He begins with arising. 17. If a nonarisen entity anywhere exists, that entity would have to arise. But if it were non-existent, what could arise? We can exclude nonarisen entities from the analysis, since the only sense that we can make of the existence of any phenomenon is in terms of its having arisen. Arising is hence a ubiquitous characteristic of phenomena. This, of course, is part of what motivates treating it, as well as stasis and cessation, as inherently existent. If this arising gave rise to that which is arising, by means of what arising? Does that arising arise? If we take arisen things to require ontological grounds, then ground them not in other arisen things, since that would generate an obvious regress within the phenomenal world, but in dependent arising itself, there remains the infinite regress, to which Nagarjuna alluded earlier. Assuming dependent arising is to be the ground, then if grounds are needed, it too needs a ground. Nagarjuna makes this explicit in the following verse. If another arising gives rise to this one, there would be an infinite regress. If something nonarisen is arisen, then all things could arise in this way. The last two lines of this verse emphasize that the regress cannot ever be cut off by positing some nonarisen arising. That would, as Nagarjuna argued above, patently beg the question. Neither an existent nor a non-existent can be properly said to arise. As it is taught before with. For neither an existent nor a non-existent. The reference of the last line is to I.6. For neither an existent nor a non-existent thing is a condition appropriate. If a thing is non-existent, how could it have a condition? If a thing is already existent, what would a condition do? The implicit argument is, then, that inherently existent phenomena cannot be said to arise since they would exist eternally and independently. Non-existent phenomena cannot be said to arise since if they did, they would exist. Arising can hence only be a property of non-inherently, but conventionally, existent phenomena. But it then follows that arising as a property can only be a non-inherently existent, conventional property. Nagarjuna now turns his attention to the properties of cessation and endurance. He begins, though, with a final remark on arising as a transition, concerning the relation between arising and cessation. This next verse must be read along with 7, and together they constitute an exhaustive discussion of the possible inherence of the three properties under discussion in ceasing entities. The arising of a ceasing thing is not tenable. But to say that it is not ceasing is not tenable for anything. The first alternative Nagarjuna considers is that a ceasing thing is arising. But if a thing is already ceasing, it is therefore no longer arising. And since all phenomena are, when their impermanence is taken into consideration, ceasing, it would follow that nothing can be said to be arising. A static existent does not endure. A non-static existent does not endure. Stasis does not endure. What nonarisen can endure? Nagarjuna now turns to stasis, the moment between arising and ceasing. This verse must be read along with 7, and, which together provide a complete examination of the status of stasis. Here he emphasizes that the moment between the arising and ceasing of a momentary phenomenon, an event, has no temporal extent. So a thing that we might conventionally refer to as static literally does not endure with identity through time. But of course, neither does something that is not even conventionally static. And finally, since as a consequence of these two premises stasis is not instantiated in any phenomenon, it itself does not endure. So, Nagarjuna concludes, stasis fails to exist over time in any sense, and so is no candidate for an inherently existent phenomenon. The endurance of a ceasing entity is not tenable. But to say that it is not ceasing is not tenable for anything. This verse plays a central role in each of two interwoven arguments. In the context of 7, and, it provides part of the exhaustive analysis of the impossibility of arising, abiding, and ceasing as instantiated in ceasing, hence in impermanent, phenomena. In the context of 7, and, it provides part of the analysis of the impossibility of locating endurance in any phenomenon, hence emphasizing the impermanence of all phenomena. Since to exist is to exist in time, and things that are ceasing are by definition not in a state of continued existence, ceasing phenomena do not provide the kind of continuity with numerical identity that endurance demands. And all phenomena are, upon analysis, seen to be constantly ceasing. So endurance has no possibility of instantiation, and ceasing phenomena cannot have this property as an essential attribute. Inasmuch as the nature of all things is aging and death. Without aging and death, what existence can endure? Moreover, since all things decay, this analysis is perfectly general. Nothing exists in the way that it would have to in order to have endurance as part of its essence. Stasis cannot endure through itself or through another stasis. Just as arising cannot arise from itself or from another arising. This verse recalls the discussion of 7:13 and has an important echo in 7. Nagarjuna argued earlier that we cannot analyze arising either as sui generis or as dependent upon some other arising. In the first case, we beg the question, in the second we invite an infinite regress. He now points out that the same is true of stasis. We can't, in order to demonstrate the inherent existence of stasis, argue that it endures because of itself. If this kind of reflexive explanation were possible, we would not need to posit stasis in the first place as an explanation of the continued existence of empirical phenomena. Each could count as self-explanatory. But if we say that stasis, like other static things, is static because of its possessing a distinct stasis, we are off on a vicious regress. The ceasing of what has ceased does not happen. What has not yet ceased does not cease. Nor does that which is ceasing. What nonarisen can cease? Nagarjuna thus completes the tripartite argument for the impossibility of the instantiation of arising, abiding, and ceasing begun in 7, and cessation, conceived of as an inherently existent, independent property, needs a substratum. We have seen in the previous 2 verses in this argument that neither arising or static things can provide this substratum. The only alternative remaining is the ceasing. But these phenomena, passing out of existence, are by definition not inherently existent and so fail as candidates. And again, since all phenomena are ceasing, this means that ceasing as an independent property has no basis. The argument here is an obvious echo of the argument against the inherent existence of motion. So, the conclusion to draw is not that there is no cessation or that there are no ceasing phenomena. That would be crazy. Rather, neither.